Reform UK's historical by-election win raises serious questions for Labour and the future of UK politics. So let's find out what's behind these game-changing results. Welcome to RIX Europe, Fred De Fossard, Director of Strategy at Prosperity Institute.
Thank you for having me again. Good to see you again, Rebecca.
The same to you. First of all, how do you interpret this Reform UK win in Runcorn, which is historically a safe Labour seat, correct? And is this a one-off, or is it a sign of a deeper political realignment?
I think it is the sign of something deeper. Reform UK overturned a large Labour majority. This was one of Labour's top 50 safest seats, and it is not traditionally the sort of place where a right-wing party does well. It is very, very impressive that Reform managed to win this by-election. They run it by a very small margin, only 6 votes, I think. But at the same time, turnout was very high. A lot of people thought that would mean the left would be very motivated to vote against Reform UK. And yet they still did it. I think it does represent something bigger. People in Runcorn and across the whole of the United Kingdom are very, very angry about immigration in particular. That is the number one subject. And one of the big issues in the area was the large number of asylum seekers who are being accommodated in hotels and hostels and private housing in the area. This was a huge issue. And even Labour tried to campaign on the issue, but because they're in government and overseeing huge numbers of asylum seekers held up in hotels, they were unable to fight it, and Reform really, really did very well here.
What role do you think Nigel Farage's return to the front line politics plays in this specific result, and could he sustain that influence nationally?
I think he can. So before the general election, Reform were polling around sort of 8, 9, 10%. This is last year, before Nigel came back to be leader of Reform UK. At that point, it was being run by Richard Tice, who is now the deputy leader. And Richard Tice did a very good job keeping Reform going as a political party and maintaining its presence in the media and political life. But it was essentially a thing which targeted disgruntled Conservative voters. Nigel Farage is the most famous politician in the country at the moment. He is almost as big in terms of character and presence as someone like Boris Johnson. So it's really, really important he was able to turbocharge Reform. He campaigned in Runcorn a lot. Worth noting, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, did not campaign in Runcorn once. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, did not campaign in Runcorn either, which I think is an interesting sign of either the parties both being pessimistic about their chances, or, for example, in the Prime Minister's case, he's quite personally unpopular, so he might have actually turned voters away from Labour even more. Whereas Nigel Farage is personally quite popular. Yes, he's divisive, but he's got huge name recognition, he's very charismatic, and he's a very energetic campaigner. And the fact that Reform also did very well in local council elections in England last week as well, where they took 10 councils off the Conservatives, suggests that they do have an appeal beyond this one by-election.
And what does Reform UK's rise tell us about the dissatisfaction of voters with the two major parties, the Labour and the Conservatives?
So I think number one issue really has to be immigration. You cannot deny the importance of that. The Conservative Party campaigned for years, decades, on being the party of low immigration. And they pledged to cut immigration, and instead between 2019 and 2024, they sort of tripled it. Over 1 million people a year were being given visas to come to the UK. Net migration was hitting 700,000 at some point. That is completely unprecedented and represented a total betrayal of trust. Labour say they want to cut immigration. They say they want to stop accommodating people from small boats and asylum seekers in hotels, but so far nothing's happening, and the illegal immigration situation is just getting worse. So in this mixture of broken promises and high immigration, and then of course low economic growth, the advocates of mass immigration said it would be good for the economy, and it clearly hasn't been. It shouldn't be surprising that a more populist right-wing party are coming to the fore. It's very similar to what's happened in Europe, whether that's Sweden or Germany or Holland or France, where the mainstream parties fail on immigration and more populist parties come.
Would you say that this is the policy or rhetoric that is proved the most effective for Reform UK, or are there other questions that are helping as well?
Yeah, so immigration will be number one. I think then it's going to be things like inflation, cost of living, the state of the health service, public services. They also do a lot on net zero and climate change and that kind of thing. But at the same time, those are much further down. I think the areas in which they can do well on economic issues is by linking it to immigration. So look at the health service. People have long waiting lists for routine procedures, whether that's seeing a doctor or getting operations. Reform are quite effectively linking that to huge demand on the health service because of immigration. And that's how they sort of bring things together. And yes, they do a lot of campaigning on net zero because, we have regulations which will ban petrol and diesel cars. We have very high energy costs. That helps, but it hasn't broken through to the top tier yet. So I would say immigration first, and how that feeds into inflation, economy, cost of living, pressure on public services that way.
What immediate lessons should Labour learn from this loss?
I mean, the Labour Party right now in office basically has no ideas. They have no agenda. They have policies going through which aren't very popular, but there isn't any sort of drive, and there isn't a clear narrative of how they're going to fix the problems facing Britain. They have an immigration announcement coming up soon, and that is apparently going to involve things like restricting immigration from countries like Pakistan, Nigeria, Bangladesh, maybe, countries which have a high rate of legal immigrants overstaying their visas and becoming illegal immigrants. So maybe that will help, but overall it's tinkering around the edges because they have so many other contradictory commitments. And they're also doing bad things on the economy, which is just going to make things worse. So taxes are increasing, regulation and employment rights is increasing. They're not doing anything serious about welfare. So it's just a sort of painful situation right now.
Of course, it's quite some time before the next general election, but could Reform UK sustain a sort of momentum here?
I think so. I think the British public are very fed up with all the major parties. So you have Reform is doing very well in loads of parts of England. The Conservative Party is going down quite badly. The Liberal Democrats, who are a kind of centrist Liberal Party, are doing quite well in middle class areas in the south of England, but they haven't sort of broken through to top level stuff yet. And meanwhile, I just don't see this current government being able to right the ship. So I think Reform will continue to do well. There will be more local elections next year. So that is elections in Wales and Scotland and more county and local council elections in England. I think it's highly likely they build on momentum there.
And this win has been described as shocking. Why is it described that way when, as you tell us, so many people are dissatisfied? So why is it still described as shocking?
I think it's true. I think there's a difference between theory and reality. A lot of people didn't believe the opinion polls, which put Reform either first or second place a lot of the time. A lot of people thought that because Runcorn is near Liverpool, it's traditionally very, very left-wing. The Tory party has never been a thing in that area for a very long time. So people sort of built up this picture that said the polls are overstating Reform. Reform's appeal is mainly online. It's mainly Twitter. It's mainly like right-wing discourse online. And they didn't quite realise that actually many ordinary people are very angry with the state of things. And it's quite psychologically shocking. A couple of years ago, the Conservative Party lost a by-election by a similar majority in a place called Chesham and Amersham, and they lost that by-election to the Liberal Democrats. And that was seismic. That changed policy in the Conservative government overnight. Basically, from the following day onwards, they stopped their plans to build more houses in the UK because they were so scared by the results. And maybe this Runcorn by-election is going to do the same on things like immigration or NHS or economic policy.
Do you believe that Labour could turn this around?
I'm getting quite pessimistic. I think they don't have much more time. Even though you said it's a long time to the next general election, it's really important in Britain to use your first 18 months in office to be really, really effective and really drive your agenda. We're now 10 months into that first 18 months since they won the general election in July. There hasn't been much sign of more interesting policy. They're doing things which are either unpopular, like their reforms to schools policy, which will be bad for the economy, like the Employment Rights Bill, or their green policies and energy policies, or which just don't go far enough, like their reforms to immigration, which I said are just tinkering at the edges.
Thank you very much, Fred De Fossard, Director of Strategy at Prosperity Institute, for your time.
Thank you very much, Rebecca.
And thank you for watching Rick's Europe.